Welcome to Greentree Approvals and Alerts. In this video we're going to look at electronic approvals and how they can be automated in the system. So here's a typical scenario where a user is going to enter a purchase order, and I have a predefined rule in Approvals and Alerts that basically says if any purchase order is raised, it's over $1,000, then it requires approval. So here we can see the user adding a line item to the purchase order, typing in a quantity. At this point we can see that the purchase order total is well over $1,000, and upon saving that purchase order we can see that it appears on a workflow desktop for pending approvals. If we reload that purchase order, we can see that on the purchase order we have a traffic lights icon. So with Approvals and Alerts you can turn this traffic light icon on for all your records. If the traffic lights are yellow, it simply means this record is pending approval. If the traffic light is green, it's actually approved, and red simply means it's rejected. And if the traffic lights are switched off, it simply means this record never required approval. Now if we click on the traffic lights, we can actually see the details of the approval. So we can see that this record requires managerial approval, and within the details of that we can see that simply means that it is a multi-level approval requiring approval by firstly the managers, so someone in a managers group, and then because it's sequential, someone in the executive group. So approvals can simply be single level, so just have something approved by my manager. They can be multi-level, they can be sequential, and they can be non-sequential. You can also set up options as in approve in advance. For example, you may allow a managing director to approve his part even though he is at the end of the chain. If you allow him to also or her approve previous levels, then that person can approve for other people as well previous to them. And override previous simply means that you can set up options along the lines of, well, if the first person rejects it, the second person can still know about that, and if they like, override that rejection. Now let's have a look at how that approval actually got on this record in the first place. So within Workflow, into Approvals and Alerts, and Rule Maintenance. Within Rule Maintenance, we would choose the Purchase Order class, and then we tell the system when we want our rule to fire. In this case, when a new purchase order is created or when a purchase order is changed. Also, purchase orders can be generated by other means. So for example, if the purchase order was created by requisitions, we still want this rule checked. If it was created by MRP, we want the rule checked. And for example, if it was on data import or even loaded in from free, we'd also like this particular rule checked. Under our What to Do tab and our conditions, there is a predefined condition of when the amount of the purchase order is between a range of values. So in this case, I only need approval on my purchase order if the purchase order raised is over $1,000. So I'd say if it was greater than or equal to $1,000 and less than and equal to basically infinity, I want this rule to fire. Under preliminary processing, I can then just tell the system what I want to happen to the purchase order if the rule actually fires. In this case, I want to change the status of the purchase order to waiting for approval. Then, under my Actions tab, I would tell the system the actions I want to take place. In this case, we have a predefined condition which is require approval on this purchase order. By selecting that, I can now choose what type of approval I like. I could choose approval by a specific person and then choose that specific person from within here. I could choose approval by a manager, and from within here I could choose the created by users manager if I like, or even their supervisor, and that's set up under user maintenance. In this case I'm going to choose a specific approval code, and I'm going to choose managerial approval. Now if you want to know what managerial approval is, if I just take a step sideways for a moment, if we have a look at our approval code setup, within here we can set up different types of approval codes. So here I select the managerial approval code, and we can see that the managerial approval code is made up of the managers group and then the executive group. Approval codes can be sequential or non-sequential, and they can be made up of actual users or groups. If we have a look at the groups, so again just going through the menu and going into approval group maintenance, if I load up the manager group, I can see that it's made up of Amanda, Angela and April. So that basically means when the managerial approval code is applied to a record, any one of Amanda, Angela or April, or in this case Super as well, can actually approve for that particular level. Only one of them needs to actually do the approval for the manager's level to be approved. Then it would move on to the executive group, and it would be waiting for Craig and Sally to approve at the second level. If we just flick across to a different approval code, we can see this one here has got the same 2 levels to begin with, but then it has Chelsea. She has approve in advance capabilities, and at the final level we have Super, who can approve in advance, approve for previous people, and also override rejections. The next thing that I may want to do is actually inform the approvers that they have an approval pending. Now obviously I can set up a workflow desktop like I have here, but this particular user may not log into Greentree all that often. So a great way to do that is to send them an email. So within my actions I can also choose send an email. In my toolbox I can select from a number of different users, including the approval groups. So in this case I want to tell the approval groups that they have an approval pending. I can also choose from my property selector. So in this case I might want to use the purchase order reference. I might also want to tell them who the supplier is. So from the purchase order itself we can find the My Supplier and maybe pop the supplier's name in there as well. Then I can reformat the way I like. As you can see there. So now as that approval rule fires, it will actually send an email to these people basically saying they've got a pending approval for purchase order, whatever the purchase order number is for the supplier name, it needs your approval. Now if the purchase order happens to be approved, I now need to tell the system what I would like it to do. In this case I'd like it to change the status of the purchase order again, and this time make the purchase order active, so simply putting it back to entered status. If the purchase order happens to be rejected, again I might want to tell the system what I'd like it to do with the purchase order. In this case I might want it to automatically cancel that particular purchase order. So that's basically how you set up a rule around a purchase order over $1,000 that you want approved. As far as actually doing the approval is concerned, the user can actually come to the desktop and right click to approve the record. They could show the record, which will bring it up on the screen, and they can also approve within the traffic lights themselves. So we click on the traffic lights, and again we can see the approval details. I can choose to approve now. Now because I'm logged in as Super, I can approve for everyone else if I like. So by clicking on OK, it's going to ask me for a reason why I want to approve this particular record. Confirming that, and now it's removed itself from my desktop. Now if we go and reload that purchase order, we can see clearly on the screen now that the traffic lights are green, meaning the record's approved. We can also see that it's back on an active entered status. If we click into the traffic lights now and show the details, we can clearly see that it was actually approved by Super for the managers and also approved by Super for the executive group, and the date it was approved and the details that Super put in. So there you go. That's how electronic approvals work within Greentree.